Hello, 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 Tessa here, your in-house shamanic healer at Guiding Star Astrology. Today I'm going to talk about how shamanism and shamanic healing has helped me and how it's helped my clients. Of course, it's a very unique journey, and I want to put it out here, first of all, that it's not as simple as getting a treatment. You know, you have a wound, you go, you have it sewed up, and then 6 weeks later or whatever it is, you take the stitches off. Doesn't work like that with healing. You are so different to everyone else. It's a unique journey. And what you do between sessions, what your life journey is, what your life purpose is, what the experiences you're meant to have are, all these things, are going to affect the outcome. So when someone comes to me for healing, I know that they're meant to see me because they need my medicine, as we say in shamanism. It's going to be something that I have the skills to handle, or that I've healed in myself, or that I am so open towards that it can help you, or that I'm just a good energetic match for the energy from spirit to flow through me. Sometimes it's spirit doing the work, sometimes it's, it doesn't even flow through me, it's just, I'm just holding the space. So we can't think of it in these black and white terms of, if I have shamanic healing, this exact thing's gonna happen. It's a deep spiritual journey. But we can talk about the things that I often see and my own experiences. So first of all, I'm going to talk as little as possible about myself, because it's just, I feel this video is going to be mostly, for you to try to understand what it might help you with. And I also want to make it clear that I'm not here to teach shamanism. I'm here to talk about personal development and, discuss the work I do, so that you know what you're booking in for if you book a shamanic healing. But I'm not here to teach shamanism. That's, something you need to seek out from indigenous people. So, first of all, I used to be very stressed. I was always on edge. I was always relying on wine at night. I was working in a job I didn't like. I was angry in traffic, beep, 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 beeping at everyone, yelling at people, kind of the opposite of what you think a healer would be, right? So my nervous system was clearly constantly on fire. A big part of that was the high pressure job, but why did I stay there for 7 years in this job that I couldn't stand, right in the middle of the city? It was kind of literally in between two of the busiest streets in the city, and on the main street. So for someone who likes nature and isn't really a city person in the first place, go figure. That was clearly something I should have handled earlier. And I was there for quite a big part of the start of my spiritual journey, which has been, a good 11 years, but I left many years ago. Anyways, I used to drink wine at night to try and suppress this, and it was this constant, cycle of getting, too agitated, trying to use alcohol to subdue it, and, it doesn't work. It just kind of perpetuates the cycle. So you get an idea of where I was at. My spiritual journey helped a lot. Eventually, I, learned hypnosis because I started working as a past life regressionist, and through that, I gradually stopped being so agitated and, changed my jobs and everything. But I eventually went to see my local shaman, and he helped me immensely. And this was after I had already given up alcohol, but my energy system was a mess. I still had so many fears and hidden things that I wouldn't even dare at, looking at. And so little skill in handling emotions and energy coming my way that, without alcohol as a band-aid, I was progressing, and I was very, people kind of saw me as someone brave who just did my own thing, doesn't care what other people think, and just kind of loving life. And that was true. But compared to now, I was stuck in this, cycle. And there was so much anxiety under the surface that anything would just trigger it. Little things would just make me kind of blow up, right? So I was on edge. From a healing perspective, of my nervous system was obviously running on like overdrive, and I wasn't doing anything to help it. And the steps from that, and the deep healing I did with my shaman, and the work I put in myself in between, was a gradual process. I remember coming out of the sessions with him feeling like, oh my God, I'm exhausted, like so much shifted. But then things would start bubbling up. And this is the thing with shamanic healing, things will come up to clear. And then you got to restructure your reality. So it really is, the shaman will go in, or shamanic healer like myself will go in to clear what you can't, to begin to extract energies and, anything you've picked up along the way and so forth that, you can't do on your own. But the work you put in between is what's going to change your life. It's a lifestyle change, right? And your own development with spirit. So Anxiety is a big thing. A lot of people are struggling with anxiety, and oftentimes we get very focused on the label. Now, I'm not talking about this from a medical perspective. I'm talking about this from a spiritual perspective, where, you know, sometimes the anxiety is the result of other underlying things that needs to be sorted. So as you do that from this holistic perspective, you don't feel so anxious anymore, and you learn what it's like to be truly still. You know, most people can't just go sit in a room away from their phone or out in the yard and just sit and connect with spirit. It's a very basic human skill that we've completely lost. And when we do, we think it has to be sort of I'm seeing crossed over spirits, or I'm achieving something, or, you know, that's not how spirit works. I mean, it can be, but spirit, you know, when you're deeply connected and still so that you can listen, it's very subtle. It may be the way the wind comes in. It might be a flight pattern of the birds above you. It might be an insight that comes to you. It might be a feeling in your body. It's very subtle, and you have to do a lot of work usually to get to a point where you can have this basic human experience of spirit. So the stillness that comes through that I've experienced and that is now my life, and that I see clients experience, is perhaps the key, because that is the spiritual journey, and that's when you heal, and that's when you're still enough to get, you know, people say downloads. I don't really like to say downloads. I sometimes do, but, you know, I think it's important to understand that sometimes it's your higher self, or it's your intuition, sometimes it's guidance, but you're receiving something, but you're doing it because you're in stillness, so you can hear it from within yourself, right? The other thing is addictive patterns. So a lot of the time those addictive patterns are a result of something else you're not coping with. So we tend to focus in the West, I feel, or in the modern world, a lot on the result of, you know, and we treat the kind of result of an underlying cause. So we have anxiety, we have addiction, and we treat those, but we don't treat what's underlying. Of course, if you have an addiction and you go to a treatment center, I'm sure they do. But I'm talking about sort of day to day and how we handle it. We go, how do I stop anxiety? But what is causing this anxiety? You know, what different factors in your life, combined with perhaps how you're just neurologically wired, are creating this situation? I'm using anxiety as an example because a lot of people that I see have experienced anxiety. As I said, this is not medical advice. I'm not a doctor. I'm not talking about anxiety from a medical perspective. You know, it's a whole other story. Stress is a big thing. Again, this is going to take work on your end. But what happens is that when people come to see me, a lot of the time, so many things have built up. So there might be a deep anxiety. There might be stress. There might be a ton of inner wounds that haven't been healed, childhood trauma, all these things. And then there's this sense of I'm stuck. I'm not, you know, I'm self-sabotaging. I don't have self-love. I don't know how to connect with spirit. And it's all too overwhelming. So when we begin to pull in kind of one end of that string, a lot of it can be cleared out. And in the process and the work you do between sessions, you know, begin to create a better lifestyle. The other thing that's been big for me is this deep sense of joy and being able to feel happiness for no reason, like random bursts of happiness. And if you're someone who struggled with addiction, you know the chemical version of that, where you have your first sip of a glass of wine, for example. That's chemically induced. That's not happiness. But when you're on a deep spiritual journey and you're healing, you can have that randomly because it's a natural emotion. It's a natural state of being, just like anger and stress and those things are natural states of being when they flow through us and they're not running our lives. So this deep sense of just contentment and centeredness in the belly and health and happiness and joy and feeling grounded, you know, the absolute opposite of the conditions and situations I mentioned at the start is what happens when you go on a deep healing journey. In terms of more concrete examples, a lot of the time when I do a cord cutting, people will literally feel free. Sometimes it's an instantaneous feeling of, my feeling about this person has now completely shifted. It's not always that intense, but it has been for some people I work with. It's an ability then to hear your own thoughts and not pick up so much from the other person, so that you can actually have a much more functional relationship. And sometimes cord cutting is done, you know, in happy partnerships, for example. It's not always in a dysfunctional relationship, if you will. With soul retrievers, you know, it's a sense of becoming whole again, coming into your full self, who you truly are, parts of you that were missing. You know, it's hard to treat a part of you that's not there. So sometimes it's as simple as, it's not that what you've tried is not working because you're doing it wrong, it's because you need something else. There might be, as I said, a soul part that needs to come back. I've talked about soul retrieval in the last video, so I won't go into that again. There may be, you know, a cord that's twisting and turning you energetically, so you feel like you can't function and think straight, but it's not coming from you. It doesn't mean you are, you know, under someone else's control and you don't have power, but if you're not aware of it, and the thing is, 1,000 years ago, with all the deep spiritual practices, you know, you may not have been in that situation, but in a world where we're so rushed and so stressed and so much on our devices and taking in so much information, we don't stop to consider and feel this and deal with it. It's not that you don't have the power to deal with it. Although I do believe there are situations where, you know, we do need help from someone else, but that's different from not being able to create shift in your own life. So another example would be, I think I mentioned this in maybe the interview, but I think it's such a beautiful example of someone who's never felt loved, never felt accepted, never felt okay with themselves. And then they have the experience of spirit in the session, giving them that feeling of unconditional love. And you know how sometimes people talk about that when they have a near-death experience, where they're like explaining this pure love from spirit, that's a pure love for your soul and being, not your human attributes and personality. You know, it's unconditional love. And sometimes people will experience that in a session. Sometimes it's a deep clear out when we're doing deeper work that I wouldn't do unless you've, you know, been working on yourself and with me for a long time, something that's called the 7 chakra illumination. We draw out energy from all of your chakras, which seems very simple, but there's something about the way we do this specific process that it, you know, it goes very deep, and you're beginning to clear out and draw out this gunky energy, for the lack of a better word, energy that's just sitting there. And you know, that can be a little bit of an unpleasant process when we're working through the lower chakras. Usually what happens is when we get up to the higher ones, it's a beautiful experience and very light and freeing. But all that stuff was already sitting there. So, you know, it was still affecting you. You just weren't aware of it. So there is an element of fearlessness that is needed, because that's the only way you can heal. You know, you have to be willing to look at it. But it's not as scary as we think it is, because spirit is not going to, day one, just throw something in your face, and it's not going to be stuff that you're unaware of as such anyways. It's going to be things that perhaps you know, layers to things, or deeper understanding to things. So what else? Let me think what else I wanted to say. It often leads to less striving. You know, we're pushing and striving so hard, and we're so much in the masculine all the time in the modern world. And through your healing, you can begin to be more in the flow and calling in. So when you get to that state, you don't go running and rushing and looking for things the whole time. You're receptive and open, so that when spirit sends you the signs, and when you get the intuition calling you to something, you know, and you answer the call without hesitation and without question. That's very different from constantly striving and trying to find something that's not going to come to you from that state. It doesn't mean we never work hard or we don't put in an effort, but it's a very different way of living life. And I don't think that's possible from a state of being, you know, unhealed with all these old programs running. Sometimes people will have a passed on relative show up. Now, I don't do mediumship. Sometimes a passed on relative will come through. Sometimes they will come through just for the client. You know, I might say a while back, for example, I was working with someone, and as I journeyed, I saw a lot of ancestors waiting around and sort of being there, and I mentioned that. And at the same time, she had seen her grandfather in her field herself, because she was quite intuitive, apologizing. So that was a very healing experience. I didn't actually on that occasion see a grandfather. I just saw the ancestors, like a bunch of them, and I mentioned it. So it can happen in so many ways, but I want to make it clear that we don't book in for a mediumship session. That's not what I do. And that's another thing with shamanism. We work with relatives that are stuck, past on relatives that might be stuck in your field or needing to be crossed over, or that come up in a session, or if they come through with a message, but we don't go looking for them. It's a very different approach. So there's so many things that can happen, and I think we often at the start get caught in talking about the things like anxiety, addiction, all these problems with abusive partners or narcissists, all these things that are perhaps making you feel like your life is restricted and you don't have your full power. So part of the journey is to free yourself, and freeing yourself from being the victim, or freeing yourself from your family line of issues, stuff that's passed down along the family line, beliefs, pain that was carried over, ways of living, ways that you see scarcity and abundance, things you believe about yourself. It's a lot about self-awareness, but whereas you do the self-awareness work and rebuilding and rewiring, your neurological state so that you can have a different worldview, the work we do in the session is that we clear the energy around that, which makes it a lot easier, because if there's all that energy sitting there blocking you, it's very hard, to begin to shift your perspective from the mind when there's an energy there that's affecting you. So it is very hard to do justice to the work in a video, and it's very hard to describe the work you do in a video, because it's so different with each person, and it's so different depending on where you're at on your journey. Some people have mind-blowing spiritual experiences in a session, but that's because they've perhaps done some work beforehand and they're able to now perceive that. So it's so dependent on you. It's actually quite funny for me as a practitioner, because I can do two client sessions in a row, and one is very gentle, very simple, and the other one is like we're out with the stars. Another thing that often happens is that my power animal that came to me, quite a long time ago, will show up to the client, but not necessarily always for me. Sometimes it's an experience where the person will come out and say, I saw this animal and it took me on this journey, or it said do this and then this happened, and I'll be laughing because that's my power animal, but I didn't necessarily see that. So there's so much help from spirit and so much going on in the other realms as we do this work. Sometimes I was working on a friend, for example, who is an ET channeler, and she has this group of beings she works with, and they came through and kind of told me to just sit back a little bit whilst they did the work. So, and then 2 hours later, I might be working with someone who's trying to release an overbearing mother that they have a cord with that's been in their head the whole day, so the whole life. So it can be absolutely anything, but it's important not to come in with specific preconceived ideas of what it's going to be like, because it depends on you. It's not in my control, and how you experience it is going to be unique to you. So there's so much beauty in it, and I think that the spiritual experience in it and what it does for your life in terms of what you understand, feel, perceive, experience in the session on a soul level is so profound sometimes, and it's stuff that you can't always explain in words. I worked with a client recently who met her family from her soul planet, if you will, from another place for the first time. And this was a journey spirit took her on whilst I was working on her energy field. I wasn't aware about that at all in the session until she told me afterwards. So, there is a level here of spirits really doing the work, right? What else did I want to tell you? The excitement that can come into your life when you feel free and you feel ready and you release some of the energy around those fears. And some of the work I do is I journey to what we call the lower world, which is kind of like the universal subconscious, if you will. And in the Inca shamanism, it's the Ukupacha, which is, where heavy energies go. It's not a bad place, but it's where the heavy energies go so that you can be filled with Sami, with light. Now, I think it's very fascinating. This is a total side note, but I think it's very fascinating that that is called Sami in Quechua, which is the Kira people's language, because Sami, spelled somewhat differently, but pronounced the same as I understand, is the indigenous people in northern Sweden, where I'm from. I'm not from the north, but I'm from Sweden. So isn't that interesting? But total side note. I've been geeking out on Norse mysticism and Norse shamanism recently, so you might hear me refer to, you know, some Scandinavian things from time to time, although I'm on a very deep path with the Inca medicine. So let me quickly check my notes. Usually I don't make notes, but I did today because I wanted to make sure I didn't forget anything, and I can go on a ramble about shamanism for hours, and I don't want to do that to you. But what else haven't I said? Yeah, the excitement and the joy and the peace and the sacredness. So at the start, you might find that you come in and you're like this bundle of energy that's just like about to burst because you've collected so much stuff over the years. You might not have had a spiritual practice and a holistic approach to dealing with that. And then you come in and some of that is removed. And sometimes spirit will actually even take you through a process where they say, have this person imagine she's taking a heavy coat off. Sometimes they'll do something specific for you to sort of be part of that process, or, you know, rewriting a soul contract. Anything can happen. But the point is, I think, in all these very random things I've shared in this video, you know, they're all part of what can happen in a session. But the overarching experience to me is that we release the energy. It's like popping a balloon. We're releasing the energy that's been pent up and stuffing around in your system. We give you tools so that you can go away and handle this energy that then kind of oozes out, and to begin to fill yourself with light and begin to dream a better world for yourself, a better life for yourself, and a new story, a story that's not created by your childhood or your parents or what you were told when you were 10, but or what the society is telling you or what your lack of self-worth is telling you, but a story that you create based on your highest possible destiny and what you're here for. And that's my goal, to help people feel amazing and live lives where they're thriving. And eventually, of course, that means looking at the choices we make, how we treat the earth, how we treat animals, how we you know, give our gifts to the world, because we all have some kind of gift, whether that's painting or, you know, being there for other people or helping the environment. There's always deeper things within you. And I find that I often first come across people either when things have gotten so tough that they can't handle the energy anymore and it's like it has to be released, or they're deep onto their spiritual journey and they're just really starting to feel that calling from their soul that there's something else and something more. So it's incredibly beautiful work. I'm so grateful to all of you that I've already worked with who might be watching this video, and it's just incredible. But I think ultimately it's like any spiritual tradition where it's about coming back to wholeness, stillness, peace, joy. It doesn't mean that we're sitting like a perfect Buddha on top of a mountain always smiling. You know, anger and those feelings are healthy, they're normal, but they're not healthy when we don't know how to deal with them and when they've been pent up for 20 years. You know, Alberto Villoldo says something like, when he talks in classes, sometimes he will say, okay, how many people have been angry for 20 minutes? And it's like, yes, of course we have. It's like, how many people are still angry with someone from 20 years ago? And he goes, that's, you know, that's not healthy. That's an old system coming from the lower brain that's running in the background. So yes, after a healing session, you do have to make lifestyle changes. And you have to, you know, no one else can do that work for you. No one else can form a connection with spirit for you. But it's a lot easier when we've cleared some of all this luggage that we've come in with. Another beautiful thing that we do sometimes with clients that, you know, we've been working with for some time is a destiny retrieval, where we go to collect this beautiful energy that helps you just align with where you're headed. And it's one of the most beautiful experiences for me because it's very simple. The way I usually do it, there are more complex techniques with that, but I'm talking about the more simple one where it's just a little bit of an energy gathering to kind of infuse you. As I see it, this is my explanation of my experience. I can't say for sure what's exactly happening in spirit. But a lot of the time when I hand this energy over to the client that I've retrieved, to ask them, is this an energy you want? Does this feel right for you? Because it's not for me to decide. Their eyes will well up with tears and they'll be overwhelmed with this sense of, oh my God, this is so beautiful. It's touching their hearts. their soul reacts to it, and it's through this very simple process. So but again, not something you usually do session 1, but it's really beautiful. And that also often comes with a sense of responsibility. There's, oh, if I take this energy now, I'm gonna have to begin to do some stuff. So it's incredible work. It's all encompassing, because the traditional, shamanic practices of the indigenous people, they work with everything from the stars to the body to energy. It's all in there, all the different levels. They weren't separate. Now, I leave the astrology for Ksenia because I haven't gotten that far in my my training with my indigenous teachers that I can call myself even somewhat knowledgeable about astrology. But it is an all-encompassing system addressing a lot of different things. Another beautiful thing that happens when someone's come in who's done a bit of work already is that I sometimes see their the skin they're shedding. We like to say it's serpent medicine in shamanism, where you're ready to shed your skin like the serpent, shed energy that's not helpful anymore. I will see it as a shadow underneath you that's detached, but it's still in your field. Or I might see you holding it even, and it's energy that's ready to be cleared. It's like, I see it as dead energy, but this is just how Spirit shows it to me. It's hucha, it's heavy energy that needs to be replaced with sami, with the light energy. I'm visual, so this is what Spirit gives me. I'm not suggesting that someone has dead energy in their field, but this is how Spirit shows me so that I know what to do. And the first time it happened, I was like, what am I seeing here? Because that's the thing as well. Every session is so different. The Spirit often will show me something I haven't seen before, or give me a technique to do that I haven't done before. And of course, I work in sacred space and with protection and guidance. I don't randomly connect with just anything and start doing things. That would be very dangerous. But a lot of the time they'll introduce new techniques, or I'll see something that they'll show me what to do with, but I don't necessarily know what it is. So the first time I saw this type of energy, I understood it needed to be cleared, and it was a very powerful experience. The client could literally feel it leave her field, but I still didn't know exactly what it was. And I talked to my shaman, and he said, yeah, she was ready to shed her skin. That was her old energy going. So he said, I've seen it many times. So this is one of the reasons why it's so important to have, elders and teachers on this path as well, just to be able to understand and keep growing in your work. So it's about coming into wholeness, stillness, right relationship with the world, with yourself, with all the elements, with all the energy. And I often talk about how people sometimes stop themselves before even trying, out of the fear that, I'm talking about projects and following your dreams, out of the fear that they're going to be judged or it's not going to work anyways. But if you don't try, and if you're not willing to go through a little bit of fear or a little bit of pain, you've already, I don't like to use the word failed, but you've already had the worst possible outcome that you were scared of, right? So I find that through this deep work, we can begin to shift some of that overly anxious, heavy energy, so that you're actually willing to just dip your toes a little bit in the scary waters, and do some shadow work, bring some light, get some good techniques under your belt, and all of a sudden you're up and running on your soul path. I mean, everyone's on their soul path all the time. I don't like this idea that we're looking for it. I don't think anyone is not on their path. I think that's kind of a little bit of a silly idea. But from, there's clearly crossroads, and there's clearly points where we can choose one or the other. I found giving up alcohol for me was one of those crossroads where I knew that unless I quit for good at that point, I was going to go down a life path that I didn't want to go. So a lot of it is deep inner work, and a lot of it is up to you. But in the sessions, you'll hopefully at some point experience spirit, the love of spirit, light energy. I had personally, one of my experiences at the start of my journey was when my shaman did a spirit flight for me, and I felt like a wave. It was the first time I experienced my energy feel like a wave. I remember coming out going, it was like I was like this, like woo, not after the session, he grounded me, but during that experience. And it was just mind-blowing to me, and I felt like that's probably what happens when we cross over, that sort of feeling as we leave our body, because I couldn't care about my body anymore. I was still in my body, but I was so light that I felt like I could just take off. And he actually at that point said, you're very light, but stay in your body. So there are so many unique, beautiful experiences you've had. Another time when another shaman did a spirit flight on me, because I'm sharing some of my experiences in this video from back in the day. I met one of my guides that I don't really work with anymore. That's, you know, was one of my guides on my earlier part of my spiritual journey, and is kind of like a bit of a guardian angel looking. So I was very fond of this guide, and he doesn't really show up anymore. And in this spirit flights, I saw him, and it was just beautiful. It was like this joyful reunion with someone who's been a teacher for you on your spiritual path for a long time. So there is a lot of clearing and deeper work, but there's also these beautiful experiences that, you know, you can't put words to. And I've shared some of them in this video, and there's many more. But to me, that's also part of it, to understand that we have to understand that there are things we don't understand. They say in shamanism, there is this something along the lines of, there is what we know, there is what we don't know, there is what we know that we don't know. And then there's this stuff that's like the unknowable. And, you know, when you begin to work with energy and the different levels and dimensions, there's a lot going on. And it can be a little bit triggering for the human brain to start with, because we like to put everything in boxes and label it. So part of this journey is to break free from that and understand that there is a bigger creative force. And, you know, when you begin to live your life from that perspective, things get easier. You notice synchronicities, and I'm sure a lot of the people watching this video, if you've watched this far, 31 minutes, you've probably had those experiences in your life. But there's just so much coming through from spirit in a session that will just, you know, you'll have a soul reaction to, that you can't necessarily put into words, but that shifts something deep within you. So I hope in this video I have to some extent explained a little bit about the beauty of this work. And people often ask, can this be used for X, Y, Z? Someone asked in the comment sections last week, I think, could this be used for dreams and struggling with nightmares and stuff like that? And, you know, technically it could be used for anything, but it's important to understand, as I said at the start of the video, it's not as easy as 1 + 1 = 2, because, you know, what are you doing in between? What's your diet like? Are you taking care of your body? Are you resting? Where do your thoughts go? You know, are you drinking alcohol, doing drugs? You know, there's so many factors that can influence things, as I'm just making the example of dreams here. Is it because of childhood trauma? Is it because of this anxiety? Are the dreams actually just a result of other things going on? So I go in and I let spirit run the session. I have a rough idea of what I want to do if it's your first session, for example, but the exact nature of the healing and what comes out of it is going to be so unique to where you're at on your path. And it's like shedding layers. You know, we shed the layers and then we can go deeper. And it's this sense of understanding more about yourself and understanding more about concepts and things in your life. And then there's another layer after that, another layer after that, and bang, all of a sudden you're ready for really deep shadow work. And you can begin to free yourself so that you feel amazing day to day. And I know at this point in time, so many people are very justifiably, is that a word? For very real reasons, frightened. But this is not a time to come from fear and pick up the, you know, not have protection and systems that you work with for yourself, so that you're picking up the fear of others, because that's just going to make things even more difficult, right? So it's very, very important to bring our power back, our center back, our ability to be in our own centered being and live from that, not from what's on the news today or what's happening down the street. And, you know, for some people, that's of course going to be harder than for others. And I'm acknowledging all the suffering that's happening in the world. But in general, from a spiritual perspective and in any point in time, it's very important to come back to yourself and come back to that full power. So I think that's one of the situations that I find a lot as well, that there's just so many things that's taking away a person's power when they're coming. There might be things attached in the field, or childhood trauma, or cords to people, all this stuff that I've talked about, soul loss. And the combination of this cocktail is that you feel like you don't have power in your own life, and that's just not true. Everything you need for your healing is within you. Sometimes you just need a little bit of a gentle push along the way, a little bit of fearlessness, and some really great daily ways to be in stillness. Stillness, centered, calm, listening to spirit. Nature, you know, and I know with lockdown, we're in lockdown here in Melbourne, so I hear you, everyone who can't go out in nature, but maybe we can open a window and breathe some fresh air or look at the tree outside. So there are ways around everything. Anyways, this is getting long. I hope I have at least shared some of what I perceive shamanic healing can do, or at least in my experience and how I work and the experiences I've had myself and that I've seen in my client. Over to guidingstar astrology.com if you want to book a session with me, and much love, and I'll talk to you soon.